Did any cottage people? No. Everybody know what a cottage is? Okay, it's like a large wooden, it's like a cabin. Lots of my friends have cottages, and I find it weird that in the last 5 years, people brag about having cottages with air conditioning and video games and cable. Because when I was a kid, if you had a cottage, you went to see if you could survive without cable and all the other amenities. And because if you're driving for 2 hours just to sit in an air-conditioned room and play video games, you can just do that at home. I don't understand where you're getting away from. My wife gets away from it all 2 times a year. She goes and visits her family. My wife has relatives in Calgary, and she has relatives in Newfoundland. Well, I don't understand the proper way to say it. Newfoundland. They don't like it when you say the D. And when she goes away, I get to sit around in my underwear and watch cartoons. The last time I took my wife to the airport, I dropped her off, and that was fun. And then about 2 weeks later, she's like, "Okay, come pick me up." So I went to Pearson Airport, but I went to the wrong arrival gate. Because Pearson used to be very basic. There was departures, there was arrivals, and that was it. But now there's like there's arrivals for international flights, and then there's one for domestic. I just went to the biggest sign that said arrivals. And I went in and I was like, this must be it. And there was about 50 people standing around me. And I don't mean to sound, without being racist, the people appeared very good at math. They appeared very good at math and karate. That's as polite as I could say it, which was great because I felt huge because they all came up to my man boobs. Which felt very empowering for a minute until one of them coughed. And then all of a sudden I had all these like SARS headlines come through my head, and I felt so guilty. I felt so guilty. But I was like, oh, time for a coffee because they're coughing. And I walked away from the herd. And I wound up at the Tim Hortons, which was right next to the domestic arrivals. So because I was afraid, I found the right place totally by accident. And I don't mean to stereotype, because I don't want to be a stereotype guy. So much so that I even wrote a piece about it. Because I don't like people who stereotype, so I wrote this pretentious poem. I have to watch what I say. I don't want to become somebody who stereotypes. I have no time for people who stereotype. People who stereotype are the worst. I hate the way people who stereotype always use words like stereotype. People who stereotype are always using words like stereotype. I never want to be a person who stereotypes. They always use the words stereotype, and people who stereotype always use words like always and people and stereotype. People who stereotype are always using the words people and stereotype and always, and I hate people who stereotype because they hate. I hate people who stereotype. Don't you hate people who hate? I hate them more than anything. I hate people who hate and talk about hate, and I hate their attributes and the characterizations they make of people, especially who stereotype. And the ones that stereotype are always boring people because they keep going on and on about stereotyping, and then they repeat themselves. People who stereotype are always repeating themselves, and then they stereotype. People always stereotype. People stereotype always. People stereotype. People stereotype always. Stereotype people always. Stereotype people.